Hello from wherever you might be watching us from. Welcome back again to this platform that is brought to you courtesy of the Ictj through net. And of course, last week we were here and we did bring you a special topic, and we had guests from one from the TRRC and Priscilla, who works with WAVE. Today we have another two guests again, and I would let them introduce themselves shortly. But let me start with the one on my immediate right. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My name is Tabunjai Sar, and I am the president of the Civil Society Gender Platform.
So there you have it. That's Auntie Tabu Sar, and let me go over to the lady on my left as well.
Thank you, Eso. I am Maimuna Mane, the National Gender Consultant at Ictj.
So there you have it, two dynamic ladies, and they would help us guide this discussion that we're going to have today. And of course, last week we did talk about the importance of having women to come out and tell their stories, you know, vis-a-vis helping them to ensure that women also are given that platform to be able to participate in this truth-seeking process, as well as come up with recommendations at the end of the day, which are going to help you know, cement the place of women in society as far as their rights are concerned. Today we'll be talking about recommendations that could or should be made to the TRRC for meaningful promotion of women's rights. That is in relation to promotion of women's rights through the truth-seeking process. So it's not very much different from what we discussed last week. But let me start with Auntie Tabu Sar. Take us through briefly your organization and the work that you do.
Thank you very much once again. The Civil Society Gender Platform was formed in 2017 as a result of the Transitional Justice Program that the Gambia has embarked on. And our main objective was to ensure that gender is mainstream in the TJ process, meaning the four mechanisms that are set out: the security sector reform, the Truth Commission, and the institutional reforms that were needed, as well as the Constitutional Review Commission. So we think as a women-led association, because it's not an organization. Okay. It is an association that was that brought women's rights advocates as well as women's rights organizations to ensure that women's participation are adequately mainstream in these processes. So we solicited funding from the UNDP, and has actually influenced all the processes so far. Although there are still challenges, but we've made some progress, and here we are in the midst of everything, and as I said earlier on, we're still grappling with challenges, but there are women participation in all the processes, all the discussions. We were part of it, coming up with the composition of the commissions, especially in terms of men and women. We actually influence the process, and as you see, in all the processes, women are adequately represented.
Well, the gender platform is indeed doing a great job, and we will delve into some of these challenges that you know, are also battling with, you know, as far as your work is concerned. But let me bring in Maimuna now to also take us through her institution and the work that they do.
Yeah. Thank you once again. The Ictj, that stands for the International Center for Transitional Justice, is an institution that is in the Gambia since its inception in 2018. They have been working, and then its main purpose is to complement the transitional justice process in the Gambia, working with government institutions and other institutions that are working towards the TJ process. Our main focus also is on women. We're working with women and women-led organizations such as the Gender Platform, which is also our partner in some of the activities that we hold. So Ictj works with various women in different regions in the country, such as the West Coast region, the North Bank region, which we recently established a space, the Upper River region in Basse and also CRR in Janjanbureh. Yeah, and with we conducted series of consultations. This was done meeting the women several times, women victims of sexual and gender-based violence and other violations, and they were consulted and severally, and then their testimonies or their revelations led to the making of a book that was the women's experiences in dictatorship. And this book was made, and it was given to submitted to the TRRC, which was very important because it helped the TRRC as well to look into some of those testimonies, because not all every woman, I mean, is brave enough to come out and testify. So that was a form of testimony, you can say, yeah. And this also was distributed across, and then, you know, voices of the women to be, you know, to be heard, you know, from that perspective. Not only having, you know, them coming to the TRRC to testify, but also giving their stories, you know, from their comfort zone. Yeah. All
right, we will now delve into our topic of discussion for today, and I'll begin with Anti-Taboo SAR. Now, following the change of government in 2017, a process was established to not only seek the truth, but at the end of that process to come up with recommendations that would ensure that we don't have a recurrence of some of these or such, you know, violations, right violations. And an integral part of this process, it has to do with women, and we know there are also so many women victims out there. Like I said, at the end of the day, there will be recommendations that are going to be made, and women, you know, have a key role to play in this. How important is it to also have women at the forefront of this process?
It is equally important as making the recommendations. Simply because our background is highly patriarchal, and as Maimuna has rightly said, some women do not have the courage to come out and testify, even though there are safe spaces that the TRRC has come up with, which we advocated for and ensure that we give our recommendations, and it was taken on board. But at the same time, the most important thing that we will recommend to the TRRC is to ensure that the recommendations are well disseminated. I know it's a government. It's meant for the government to implement, and actually it was the government that instituted the TRRC. But the TRRC is a victim-centered commission, and as such, and also gender is adequately mainstream with the Women's Affairs unit. But it is important for the recommendations to be disseminated, and women to take ownership of these recommendations, especially in recommendations that really relate to women. If civil society organizations or women-led organizations know these recommendations, it will provide a platform for us, especially the gender platform, to ensure that we advocate for the implementation of these recommendations, especially in cases of SGBV, the sexual and gender-based violence, which is not normally discussed, even at home. We are brought up in such a way that sex is not discussed, it is a taboo. And looking at the testimonies that came out from the TRRC, especially on SGBV, some recommendations will be made. And it is important that these recommendations are disseminated so that CSOs can actually pick it up and ensure that they are implemented. If you look at the way that the TJ was composed of, we have some recommendations that will be legislative related, and I'm not preempting, but I am sure that it would have helped more if the draft constitution was passed, because some of these recommendations really we rely on the 2021 draft to be implemented. But nonetheless, there are other alternatives that can be used, but it will be very important if the report is shared so that relevant organizations can take it up to ensure that these recommendations are implemented, especially when they relate to women.
I'll come back to you on a few issues that you've highlighted as far as today's topic is concerned. But let me engage Maimuna now on the importance of our topic of discussion today.
Yeah, so like Tabu mentioned, bringing women in the forefront of the TRRC's recommendation is very key. We saw that some of the victims or some of the people that went to testify at TRRC, let's say majority are men. But if you look at the impacts, of dictatorship, it affected mostly women in this country. So, but then why are women not coming out? Is one question that we raised. And then when you look at our society, when you look at some of the issues that are related to women, especially when we talk about SGBV, like Tabu mentioned, it is not discussed. And then these are the things that made women to, step back, not come up, to give maybe their testimonies or just to show up. So it is on these backgrounds that the TRC's recommendation should really be gender sensitive. It has to look at some of these things and put them into consideration. Also, if you look at the way the TRRC is today, you can say that okay, they were banking on the draft constitution, which is, I would say, is in coma at this point. But then, nonetheless, it's still we are still hopeful. We are still hopeful that these recommendations would be victim-centered, and then there will be recommendations that are going to look at women's plight, and then to ensure that they never again is fully implemented in these recommendations. Yes, so that is why we are really hopeful, and that is why we're really banking on the recommendations to be very gender sensitive, and also to make sure that every victim sees him or herself, in those recommendations.
Okay, so talking about victims seeing themselves in these recommendations, I'll engage the both of you on this. Earlier, Tabu, you did highlight the need for women to take ownership of this very important process. We know that a greater chunk of the victims are women, as you've highlighted, but not many of them are coming forward, taking part in this process, and this is down to a few factors. How important is it for women to take ownership of this process?
It's really important for women to take ownership of this process, simply because if you look at sexual and gender-based violence, I relate my I'll mention sexual and gender-based violence mainly because it's something, as I said, that is not normally talked about, and this is an opportunity. This process gives women, especially survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, the opportunity to be heard, the opportunity to bring out what they have suffered by state authorities. But at the same time, if women do not own the recommendations that will come out, especially in these areas, it will be very difficult to champion these recommendations, because I think it will be better if we discuss it, or if we advocate for it, or if we raise awareness on these issues at this particular moment in time, simply because we are in the process of reforming. We are in the process of changing, and when we advocate and take ownership of it, then we will see a transformative change within women, so that the women who suffer from it will be the ones who will advocate for it and ensure that it does not happen again, and also save other women and girls, because we have to understand that the society that we live in, reporting, not only talking about it, but reporting these things is a problem, because once you report it and it is out in the public domain, everybody starts victim blaming, everybody starts judging. But if we have a recommendation relating to those, and it is a government-led document, I'm sure we will have the relevant stakeholders who will take actions. But then it has to be really advocated for and pushed by women, because we've been sealing all these underneath the carpet for a very long time. Since we've got legislation, but it hasn't actually give us the opportunity, give us, as government will say, we're promoting women's rights. But in actual fact, in reality, it does not happen, simply because most of these cases go underreported. Now we have learned from the TRRC some of these cases that are out. Now, if recommendations are made, I think that is one step forward to ensure that we promote it and ensure that recommendations are done, are implemented. But it will not have the weight that it requires if the people that are required to push it are stepping backwards. So it's important for women to come forward, and if these recommendations are up for us to carry the flag.
Okay. Maimuna, the recommendations would play a key role in ensuring that we don't have a recurrence of some of these rights violations, especially when it comes to women. How important is it that they take part and ownership, in fact, of this process?
Very well. So Ictj, in our part, like I mentioned, we've been holding series of consultations across the regions in the country. And just recently, we held a coordination meeting between the women in the region, or the women in the regions and the capital-based women. And then those are the ones leading their organizations or associations, such as the Gender Platform, WAVE, Think Young Women, and other organizations that are led by women. So in taking ownership, we believe that the women from the regions and those here have this gap between them, and this meeting was made or was conducted to have that gap breached, so that we can have this technical support from the women-led organizations, and also the women from the regions also share their experiences, because most of them are the ones that were victimized. So you would see that this meeting was, during the meeting, there were a series of recommendations that came from both sides, that came from the women-led organizations and the local women from the regions. So this is one of the ways that, they are taking ownership of, themselves in the TRRC's final report. And the meeting was centered on that. How to make the report more gender sensitive, how to make women's voices amplified, when the recommendations are out. And also, like Auntie Tabo said, this is the time that we are supposed to push these recommendations to be, even before it's out, CSOs have to, come together and talk about the recommendations, because if you have a recommendation, if the TRRC is done with their recommendation, they have to pass it to the office of the president, and it has to be with the president for at least 6 months. And when you look at that period, we are in an election year. So would the president really have the time to go through all this document? So it is up to us, the CSOs, to push this, to push this agenda, to make sure that these recommendations are, well scrutinized, they are well, looked into, so that, what it's due, it's given.
I think in addition to what Maimuna has said, I think one main thing that we have to understand as well is that women have been marginalized for a very long time, and part of the recommendations that we would like to see is to ensure that not only victims, the recommendations are centered only on victims. I think the recommendations should go beyond that, because if you look at the testimonies from, especially from men, they were able to express themselves of how things unfolded. But with women, even if they had the opportunity to sit and testify, I'm sure not all of it has come out. So if recommendations are being made, looking at only the violence will also limit we also have some shortfalls with the recommendations. So because it wasn't only the actual perpetrator victim that occurred. There were some deficiencies that also occurred in terms of weakness in institutions, in terms of authorities overusing their power, but also in terms of women's limitation in having political rights, in having social rights, access to education, access to health, but also lack of the economic empowerment, and that leaves women in a vulnerable situation that was abused. So in terms of the recommendation, it should go beyond just the physical, but also to ensure that recommendations are made that will help to actually have some of strong institutions at least, and even empower women to have other rights other than just being a vulnerable or a marginalized human being. And the respect as well for everybody. Respect in the sense that a man and woman deserve respect in workplaces, in the private homes, in the public, simply. So the recommendations that I foresee for women should be a holistic recommendation that ensures that all the issues are. I mean, I know it will require funding to implement all this, but at least if it is on paper, government comes and goes, and it will be a document that will be there, and as he said, the private sector, the civil society organizations can take it up and advocate and ensure that there is empowerment in all these areas, both social, political, and social rights of women.
Now, the both of you have highlighted something very important, which is the challenges also that we have in getting women to take part in this process, as in taking ownership and all of that. Now, given our social setting, we know there are factors here and there that are also undermining efforts to have women at the forefront. They include the culture of silence, stigma, and even victims also being traumatized. And a lot of this has to do with, victims of gender-based violence. Are there any challenges as well that you face in the work that you do with your various institutions as far as getting women to come on board and also take part in this process is concerned, in relation to the recommendations that the TRRC would also be coming up with at the end of their mandate? Let me start with Maimuna.
Yeah. So there are, like you said, it's the society, like the setting up of our society. It's patriarchal, and you can see that sometimes for women to come and speak up, like you mentioned, the first thing they would ask is it true? There comes the victim blaming. Okay, so we live in a society where men are like perfect, and sometimes when you point your hands or when you point your fingers to someone that abused you or harassed you, and then it's not the person that you pointed that is being questioned, but you. What were you doing there? Why would he even do that to you? These are the things that we have in this society, thus making it very difficult for women to come out. And you would see that during the consultations that we have with these women, these are the things they would tell you. It starts from the home, even for your brothers, your husband, your cousins, the males, literally in the family, wouldn't even allow you to do certain things or say certain things. And if you're in a gathering where men are, you're not supposed to talk. These are all things that are, making the woman to be suppressed, her voice to be suppressed. And this is one thing that during our meeting, Priscilla said that women are not voiceless. It is they are not voiceless. They have voices, but how can you hear their voices when you are not giving them the platform, in order to amplify their voices? They are not given the spaces to tell their stories. So these are the things that are lacking. That is why women are not coming up. The culture of silence is there. Why? Because if I come out with my story today, who is going to believe me?
Sure.
So I rather sit in my own corner and keep it to myself than speak up. So these are the things that women face, and you will see that it starts from the family, then goes to the community, then the whole society or country at large. Yeah. So those are some of the things that they face. That is why they are not coming out.
I think Maimuna has summed it all, but just in addition to what she has said, apart from the sociocultural, the socialization process that men and women go through, especially in a society which is highly patriarchal, such as ours, there is also it further weakens your confidence.
Sure.
Even if you, because this is where the problem of underreporting comes in, because you are socialized in such a way that you have to be timid, you have to be submissive, and even if it is happening at home, and you want to tell your parents that this is what Mr. X is doing to me, you're not given the opportunity. You are just told to shut up. You are just told to be quiet. You are not telling the truth. So if you put this in you, or even if it comes out, sometimes it's out there. A girl child is raped, and the person is caught, and what happens is, instead of leaving the case to go through the process in the courts, it's normally withdrawn, and sometimes it's the victim, the survivor, is even transferred. Sometimes it goes to the extent of the whole family vacates the community because of the pointing, because of the stigma, the discrimination that the girl child is anticipated here, which is, and then this girl child goes through with this, and others that are in the community and seeing this will be scared also to talk about it. And there's one thing that I would like to highlight here. On the not reporting a case is very dangerous, simply because you are not only saving the girl from being stigmatized or the family name from being talked about or tarnished, but you are also allowing the perpetrator in the community to be at large, and no girl child is safe in that community. That is very important for us to understand. So in addition to what he said, I think there is need for more education. A recommendation that I would like to say is for more education on SGBV, because it's so hidden in a bundle that you don't talk about it. Anybody who's a survivor of it, you're told to be quiet, and that person lives with that person for a very long time, and there are no facilities for the girl child or anybody who's raped. And mind you, men are being raped as well.
Sure.
It's not only to women. Men are being raped. That is why it is very dangerous for us to be quiet about it. I think it's about time for us to start talking about it, to educate our girl children, to be very assertive. And if a girl child comes to you and wants to say something, listen. Because if you don't listen, that perpetrator is in the community, but also your girl child will leave not being confident to say anything. And this follows you up to, even if you are in a workplace, and not only being sexually abused, but even being given the opportunity to access all the opportunities that you have. You feel so scared to come forward and demand your rights.
True.
And I think we are in the 20th century. We need to move away from it. That is why the TRRC, with the testimonies that have come out, I mean, I look forward to the implementation, but I also look forward for the Gambians to own this, because women only cannot ensure that this is implemented. We need the efforts of everybody, men, women, civil society, the private sector, and government leading. Yeah, we do, because it is important. I'm glad that all these things are coming out, and at least there is a platform and it is being discussed. Even though some will say, as you ask, do I face many challenges? Of course I do. And every
Sure.
time they're telling me, you always fight for women. But when I fight for a woman, I fight for a man as well, because a woman is the mother.
Absolutely.
It's a sister. It's an aunt. It's a grandmother. So a woman is the society. So when we advocate for women's advancement, we're advocating for society's advancement. And I think this is the approach that everybody, the perspective that everybody should see, women empowerment and gender sensitive.
I couldn't agree more. Talking about gender sensitive, I would like us to switch over to the local language as well for the benefit of our local audience. But just a quick one before we do that. The need to have recommendations that are gender sensitive. Yes, let me have you both comment on that, and then we can switch over to the local language. Maimuna.
Yeah, it's just like we highlighted earlier. Like she just, Untitled just mentioned, if the recommendations are gender sensitive, you know, they include women, and not just the victims, but women at large, you know. So it's for the advancement of the society. It's for the society to prosper. Because if one woman succeeds, I mean, the whole country succeeds, you know. So it's important that these recommendations are gender sensitive and also include women, victims, and every other person, you know, that is to be that has a right to it, okay. And also because we don't want a repetition of what happened. We want to really have the never again as a reality, you know, the never again slogan to be a reality. Then for the recommendations really need to be gender sensitive. It needs to be centered on the truth, like the commission itself. It needs to be centered on the truth, and then as we are seeing the truth unveil, so we can have a recommendation that is that fits, you know, our realities as well. Okay, and then we can see that women can be empowered through these recommendations. Their rights can be, you know, implemented, or their rights can be seen to be given to them and protected as well. And it can basically to just advance the nation as well.
Okay.
I think one recommendation that I would give, which I deem gender sensitive, is to have a recommendation that brings out education. I think educating men and women on gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence, and go further to also recommend that SGBV becomes a standalone subject in schools, so that we educate our children whilst they're young, so that they grow up with that mindset of seeing everybody as equal.
I think this is an important point, because issues around SGBV are, because of the nature and our society as well, these are quite sensitive issues, and mostly, you know, we don't talk about them. We don't have this kind of conversation, especially in public. So it's important. You've raised a very important point.
Yes, it is important, because as the saying goes, you catch them when they're young. Because of the way that we're socialized, and as we said, as we know that it's not discussed. I mean, I dare not go to my mother and father and start talking about sex. And even if I go outside and talk about sex, they will see me as a bad child. You know,
society frowns at this.
I mean, you're not well trained. So actually, the education part of it, I would recommend for it to stand out. Prominent in the recommendations to educate our society on sexual and gender-based violence, that it has no place in development. Because one, sexual and gender-based violence puts on heavy, it's very heavy, it allocates, well, how can I put it? It is very expensive to administer sexual and gender-based violence, simply because it always comes as emergency. It's something that you cannot determine, and it is putting a lot of pressure on our budgets. And having the perpetrator incarcerated costs money, Prisoners, I mean, to provide for them their breakfast, lunch, and you know,
very true.
It's very expensive. And also the person who is who has gone through the act,
violation.
the victim, the survivor. I mean, to actually help that person to come out of it and be bold enough and to go by his or her life is equally very expensive. And we do not have the facilities even. We do not have the facilities to actually help victims and survivors like in developed countries. So if we educate our people, especially our young ones, I'm sure one day we will graduate from men beating their wives, rapists raping young girls, raping a girl child as young as 8 or 9, and then we will also eradicate the victim blaming, because as Maimuna has rightly said, if a girl child is raped or a woman is raped, people start judging. Why was she wearing this?
Yeah.
Why did she go to that place? She caused it. She's the one who brought this to herself. But a baby as young as 8 months, what is that baby?
3 months.
What has that baby wear to entice a man? So, and then it will help also to at least teach men and people that are sick to at least tame them whilst they're young. It can be a cure. I think education, educating men and women as well, because it's not only men and women as well, to at least stop this act is because it destroys somebody's lives and it's a human right violation. I think it is very important to have it as a very prominent recommendation.
And to add on that, Ansumana, like she said, it's a human rights violation. And one of the recommendations that came out from our meeting is that those who are banking on the TRC giving them amnesty should or have it at the back of their minds that a human rights violation, you cannot have an amnesty on that. And rape is one of those things. So we have to be really careful on these things. So you can look, you should know, like, rape is really a very sensitive, topic, sexual violence, but rape, at its peak, so people that are banking on having that they might get amnesty or they might get freed when they commit such crimes should have it at the back of their mind that, it's a human rights violation, and no amnesty should be granted.
It's actually a very serious crime.
Yes, it is.
All right, so at this point, I would like us to switch over to the local language briefly before we wrap up for the benefit of our local audience as well. Mbokk yi ba léegi ñu fa lay naa ngi toppali di QTV ñu indi leen waxtaan bi nga xamante ne ñu ko dooleel mooy di ICTJ ak ñi ñoo liggéeyal te nag ñu amaat fi yeneen ñaari gan Maimouna Mané moom mu ngi bàyyeekoo ci ICTJ nga xamante ne ñoom ñu ngi dooleel lépp loo xamante ne moo ajoog lu jëm ci wàllum transitional justice process bi gis na daal ñi nga xamante ne yaaxoon nañ fi seen àq ñu nekk ñoo xamante ne ñu ñoo dooleel la ak dooleel tamit lépp loo xamante ne mooy gën a dëgëral nit ñi seen àq ci biir réew mi tamit Anti-Taboo Sarr moom mu ngi bàyyeekoo ci gender platform bi ñoom itamit ñuy liggéey bu am solo ci lu jëm ci li nga xamante ne laa wax rek ci gannaaw dinaa leen bàyyi ñu nuyoo bu ko defee ñu indil leen waxtaan bi tamit ci gàttal comme ni ñu koy defee rek ci kàllaama nasaraan ma njëkkee ko ci Anti-Taboo.
jërëjëf Ansoumana mbokk yi ñu ngi leen a nuyu di leen wax ne ñu ngi toppa mbiri TRRC bi man maa ngi jógee ko ci gender platform bi mu nekk mbootaay boo xam ne ay jigéen ñoo xam ne ñoo yëngatu ci wàlli dooleel jigéen ak góor ñoo ko sos waaye mel li ñu seeg gën a gëstu si mbiri jigéen because gis ne jigéen dafa néew doole jigéen dafa néew xam-xam as benn jigéen ni ma ko waxee mu ne jigéen amul doole jigéen amul xam-xam soo jigéen dafa am ñaari yëf yoo xam ne daf ko sonal torop ci àddina soo bi nguur gi tegee mbiri soppi bi pour ñu soppi seet suñ lu waaye seet niñ nekkee woon ak jalgati ak yelleef yi fi amoon ñu gis ne jigéen ñi tamit am nañ ci waala su ñu def mbootaay boo xam ne dinañ gis ne tamit jigéen ñi seen kaddu ak seen baat dinañ ko diiga tamit ci soppi biñ tegal waaw pour gis ne daal ak jigéen ak yelleefam gis nañ ne daal nguur gi jox na leen seen gëdda so loolu taxoon ñu form lii nii biñ ko formé nag amoon ñu ko dépassé woon mooy UNDP ñun ñëpp ñu ñëw bindoon nañ xaatimoon nañ benn pipa boo xam ne waxoon nañ ci suñ bugga ne niñ bugg a gisee yëfi demee daal nañ ci boole jigéen ñi na ci jigéen ñi bokka parce que digal luwaay yi am nañ fi luwaay yu baax waaye luwaay yi benn tey dafa des so loolu taxoon ñu jóg boole si te biñ ko defee tamit amoon nañ ci kontaan te torop parce que gis nañ ne soo gisee ci commission yi ñu tegal yëpp gis nañ ne soo fa gisee góor di nga fa gis jigéen waaw ni ñoo doxalee tamit ñu bool gestu ci ne góor ak jigéen ñoo bokka mbir mi nii so ñun nag biñ paree UNDP Ictj tamit am nañ partnership ak ñoom so da ngaa gis ne sax amuñ woon fuñ dëkka waaw jënd plateforme am na ko fuñ dëkka so Ictj ñoom ñoo ñu dëkkoo ñuy liggéeyee ñoom di wécce wante ñoom xalaat pour gis rek ne jigéen ñi tamit gis nañ seen boppa ci transitional justice programme bi nga xam ne Gambia tegoon nañ ko.
Maimouna moo fi nekkal Ictj wax ñu tuuti si yenn seen buntu liggéeykaay ak yenn ci liggéey ngeen a def.
ok jërëjëf Ansoumana comme ni nga ko waxoon si kàllaama angale rek ñun ñooy Ictj maa ngi tudd Maimouna Mane Ictj mbootaay la boo xam ne dañ ko taxawal fii si Gambia pour mu jàppale buntu liggéeykaay yoo xamante ne dañ nekk di gestu si transitional justice process bi bokk na si mooy TRRC ak yeneen civil society organizations yoo xamante ne dañ nekk di liggéey pour wéccute bu am ni naka la ñoo mën a diimee kanam génn si toroxtaange yu ñu amee woon si beneen nguur bu fi nekkoon waaw bokk na tam suñ liggéey yi dañ dee liggéey ak jigéen yi yu nekk si dex bi si région si yëpp si Gambia bi ñu ngi liggéey ak jigéen yi foofu noonu te suñ liggéey tamit suñ kàllaama liggéey mooy dañoo dem fekk jigéen yi waxtaan ak ñoom déglu leen seen jafe-jafe yuñ jànkuwanteel woon si former régime bi waaw loolu tax na ba waxtaan yi bari woon nañ jigéen yi tam génn nañ wax ñu lan moo leen daloon si dictatorial period bi ñu jël wax yooyu noonu yëpp boole leen def ko si benn book bi ñu ngi ko ooyee the women's experiences during the dictatorship so book boobu noonu leen jël ñu jàppawante TRRC ñu jël book bi submital leen ko mooy jox leen ko buñ ko loncee tam ñu jox leen ko gars yi seet si book bi gëstuwaat ne gis jigéen yi lan lañ doon jànkuwante parce que tey am na jigéen yu bari ñoo xamante ne ñëwuñ génn pour wax ci télé bi parce que suñ société bi nu mu mel la waaye book bi tam dimbale woon na gaay torop parce que gaay gëstu nañ ci jigéen yi ni ak ci seen région suñ nekk ak ba pare gaay amoon nañ ay waxtaan tamit ak ñoom after buñ defee consultation ci nii
Antita bu may mën a wax na ci jigéen ñi seen ñàkk a génn pour bokk ci transitional justice process bi naam ne ñu ngi génn waaye melut noonu soo ko waree compare ak góor yi li ñoo waxtaanee tey mooy njëriñ bi nga xamante ne moo nekk ci jigéen ñi ñu war a bokk ci process bi nga xamante ne TRRC saa yuñ jeexalee seen liggéey ba ñu war a xaatim ay recommendations maanaam ay ndigal yi nga xamante ne nguur war na cee mën a bàyyi xel pour dooleel jigéen ñi mu nekk loo xamante ne luy gën a dooleel jigéen ñi la ma bàyyi la rek nga xuus si loolu bu ko defee ma dugal tam Maimouna
waaw li ñoo wax rek mooy ñun liñ gis mooy ne su nekkee ne liggéey bi dem na bay waaj a jeex parce que léegi tey TRRC liggéeyam bi jeex njëriñ yi nga xam ne moom la nguur gi moom la commission bi di war a génnee si bugga nañ si mu ahi jigéen aham ak yelefam ñu gis ne dafa am na yokka nañ si njëriñ yi naam sax ne am na loi comme ni ma ko waxee boo xam ne jigéen ñee ko moom seen aha ak seen yelef waaye ba tey dafa am yoo xam ne su ñëwee ci mbaali sëy loi bi nga xam ne moom lañ fi teg mu war a daan képp koo xam ne jalgati nga loolu noonu dañ dee gis ne daf dee sooxe torop parce que li tax mooy ñu bari suñ ñëwee pour wax dañoo dem ba ca digga ñu wàññi ñu génn ci wax bi dem foog ne soo noppee nga sol ko dem waxuloo kenn dara den mu ngi ok waaye gis nañ ne du ok so da ngaa gis ne am njëriñ bi nga xam ne TRRC recommendation si mu ngi njëriñ bi ñëw nii dañ ko war a defar jébal ko government waaye tamit suñ ko defaree mu umba ak yelleefi jigéen ñi foog naa ne suñ la defalee loi yow mi nga xam ne yow lañ ko defal soo taxawee jàppasi dina mun a dem waaye soo bàyyi yox-yoxee wariwuloo ci rek du dem ba pare gaañ bi dina continuer so moo tax ñun ñu ne comme que xuus nañ ba egsi fii si liggéey bi léegi li ñoo def rek su nekkee ne njëriñ bi génn na ñun dinañ jël njëriñ boobu noonu ba pare jàppasi gis ne at least li nga xam ne mooy safe jigéen ñi dinañ ci def dara waaye tamit dinañ waxtaan ak government pour gis ne tamit lii ñu wax ne suñ ko defee day dina jàppale jigéen ñi so nañ ci dinañ ko def so pour jigéen ñi jël ko daal moom ko daal dina am solo torop because pour ñun la
ok
waaw
ñu ngi maa wane ne liñ dese si waxtu daanaka dafa niiw torop waaye Maymuna ma bàyyi la ci gàttal rek mën nga ñëw highlightal tuuti yenn ci jafe-jafe yi nga xamante ne moo gën a tax sax jigéen ñu bari duñ génn pour ñëw bokk ci process bi ndax li ñëw def rek jubluwaay bi mooy gis ne at the end bi dañ am recommendation yoo xamante ne dafa dooleel jigéen ñi nga indi ñu tuuti rek very briefly ñu ngi am 3 minutes yenn ci jafe-jafe yi nga xamante ne yéen bàyyi ngeen ko seen biir liggéey ne jigéen ñi loolu bokk na si lu leen nekk di pousse gannaaw
waaw Ansoumana comme ni ñu ko waxee rek si suñ dëkkuwaay yi dañ gis ne jigéen nekkul ne amul baat waaye am na baat waaye baatam fan lam ko wonee ba pare jigéen su amee lu ko naxari lu ko daal fan la moo amee space boobu noonu pour mu wax ko pour mu wax storeem bokk na si lu ñoo wax suñ daanee si kaw jigéen tey jigéen bi bu waroon a génn pour wax ne point fingers wala mu tuum ne kii moo daanu suma kaw dinañ jël jigéen bi ñoom daal léegi waaw nañ ko ëbbati waaw si jigéen bi lañ koo indi léegi lu ñoo wax victim blaming so victim blaming bi si jigéen bi la moo nekk instead da ngaa gis ne tey jigéen su amee jafe-jafe du mun a génn a wax parce que tey dinañ ko laajte loo fa doon def dinañ ko laajte lu nga sol nii ndax waroon nga koo sol dinañ am yu bëri yoo xamante ne dinañ ko laajte jigéen bi waaye fàtte nañ ne moom la jafe-jafe bi am moom la jafe-jafe bi dal waaye duñ dee seet loolu noonu yëpp nañ seet na tamit suñ société bi tamit góor yi ñoo ëppa doole te soo gisee yii yëpp di am doole dañoo jaay doole suñ jaayee doole si suñ place yi liggéeykaay yi suñ place yi jëndaa jaay yi suñ si biir kër yi si liggéeykaay yi everywhere da ngaa gis ne doole lañ faa jaay so kon ni mu ko Antita bu waxee rek ñu ne jigéen dafa néew doole so doole boobu boo ko jaayee moom at the end of the day du mun a am fit bi pour génna wax ne lii moo ma dal wala lii moo ma dal da ngaa gis ne tey góor dina dóor jabaram te dara du si génna parce que lu xew moom moo ko ëppa doole si biir néegi sëyam te loolu yëpp yoo xamante i ñaawteef lañ yoo xamante ne dañ nekk di dal jigéen yi te jigéen yi mënuñoo génn pour wax ko ndaxte société bi dañ leen dee castiger dañ leen dee wax naka sudut noonu so lii tam bokk na si yoo xamante ne duñ mun a génn pour gay wax seen tolof-tolof wala seen jafe-jafe yuñ dee jànkuwanteel
Antita bu tey soo doon bàyyee kàddu képp koo xamante ne mu ngi seetaan programme bi ci jamono ji moo xam jigéen la moo xam góor la ci li jëm ci jubluwaay bi mooy recommendation yi pour gis ne dina gën a dooleel jigéen lan lay doon
li ma leen a bàyyi rek mooy ñu nekk di ñu jàngalante parce que jànga moom mun a wécci suñ aada yi suñ jikko yu bon yi ba pare moo ñu mun a dooleel waaw jànga tey dégluwante te bañ di suñ ñëwee di la waxal déglul nit ki saka especially xale bu ñëwee di la waxal parce que ba pare doole bi ñoo yaree góor ak jigéen ci suñ biir kër yi dañ ko war a seet because doole soo ko amee doole bi da nga ko war a tasaare jigéen da nga ko war a dooleel góor da nga ko war a dooleel parce que pour ëllëg a tax parce que soo gisee yëpp ñu jànku wante ñoom doole bi dañ ko poussé benn boor ki am doole bi am na ñoo xam ne nag ñu ngi am doole te dañ ci dee def lu baax waaye am na ñoo xam ne tamit ñu ngi am doole waaye dañ ko dee abuse dañ jee yaaxal nit àddinaam soo li ma wax rek mooy su nekkee ne njëriñ bu ma dénku TRRC bi la mooy suñ njëriñ bi suñ ko seega nañ gis ne jigéen njëriñ bi su ñëwee dinañu dimbale ñun askan wi saka askani jigéen waaw doole parce que ñoom rek ñoo am opportunité bi fi mu nekk nii pour mun a soppi bi ñoo oote saka soppi si diggante góor ak jigéen ci mbiri sëy ci mbiri gaañe ci mbiri dóore ci mbiri loo xam ne dafa yàq àddina jigéen su baax na daal pour ñu indil ñu rek njëriñ yoo xam ne daal dinañu mun a jàppale
loolu am na solo Maymuna ma baale yow tamit nga daaneel sa kàddu ci yan façon ngi njëriñ ngay bugg a gis su TRRC demee ba jeexal liggéeyam maanaam recommendation si yan façon ngi recommendation si yow ngay bugg a gis yoo xamante ne na dooleel jigéen
waaw benn si seen recommendation si bugg nañoo gis ne jigéen ñi first of all dañ bugg a TRRC bi su paree comme bu mu nekkaat pare na jeex na nañ continuer di def yi nga xamante ne dañoo dooleel jigéen yi bokk na si seen recommendation si dañ bugg a jigéen yi ñu am plateforme si mun a wax seen soxla mun a am space boo xamante ne dinañ si génnee seen baat nañ si mun a wax seen lu leen dee naxari xam nga ñu wax loo xamante ne jànkuwanteel nañu ak moom because tey soo gisee tey nekkul ne jigéen yi yëpp am nañ conviction ne dinañ war a dem TRRC war a wax seen stories mais xëy na su jeexee am na ñuy ñëw so ñooñu suñ ñëwee ndax ñooñu dinañ am space boobu noonu so bëgg nañ tam plateforme boobu mu nekk si foofu noonu pour jigéen ñi secondly tamit bëgg nañ jigéen ñi ñu am that empowerment ñu am that doole ñoom tamit ñu ema góor yi si developmental aspects yi nii fekkee ne am liggéey la jigéen a góor ñu am liggéey comme ni ko Ante Tabu waxee kayit yaa fi waaye kayit yi nekkuñ di leen implement sexual violence ak bang fi waaye ndax tey ku rape jànga wala rape jigéen ndax sexual violence act bi ñu ngi ko use ni nga ko war a usee ndax loolu yëpp ñu ngi ko def so implementations of documents yi nii dañ bëgg a tam gis ko dañ bëgg a tamit TRRC bi bu pare recommendation yu moo def nam nekka recommendation yoo xamante ne jigéen bi dina si gis boppam waaw dina si gis boppam ne xam ne waa ñii de seen ñetti at yi ñu doon gestu si mbir yu ñawteef yi fi xewoon dégg la tey gis nañ si suñ boppa muy jigéen muy góor tamit waaye saka muy tamit jigéen parce que dañ gis ne métit yu bëri si kaw jigéen yi la tegu parce que tey buñ rayoon sa jëkkër wala ñu disappear sa broda wala koo xamante ne moo doon jore sa kër yow tey kooku su demee yow jigéen bi yaa face difficulties yooyu noonu yaa tolof yi yëpp sa kaw la nekkoon soo suñ ne tey nga soo tooñee góor sa tooñ nga jigéen saka soo tooñee jigéen directly waaw soo bëgg nañoo gis recommendation yi ñu mu include jigéen jox ko axam comme ni mu waree
ok ñu jaajëfal leen bu baax a baax Maymuna Mane moom mu ngi bàyyi ko ci Ictj comme ni ma ko waxoon rek si gannaaw Ante Tabu Sarr moom mu ngi bàyyi ko ci gender platform ñu jaajëfal leen bu baax ci li ngeen ñëwoon waxtu bi nag xooj nañu fii la ñu am ak yéen tey waaye dinañ dellusiwaat incha allah next week pour andi leen waa beneen topic fas yéene ubbiwaat beneen bunti waxtaan I'm afraid that is all that we have time for Ante Tabu and Maymuna, we say thank you for coming. We appreciate that you took time to come and take part in this very important discussion. We look forward to engaging you again, hopefully next week. Until then, on behalf of the Ictj, the Gender Platform, the TRRC, and WAVE and their partners, we say thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, same time.